Care beatitudine,
Your Beatitudes, Eminences, Cardinals, brothers and sisters, and beloved young people. We are here today to speak about young people, and we can feel the force and strength of your presence, which gives out so much enthusiasm and can energize not only the church, but the church throughout the world. That is why I cannot look at you or speak to you without saying thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for so many people who have gone through a long 2-year course of preparation here in the Church of Rome and in all the churches throughout the world, and have worked with devotion and passion to bring us all together at this time. And I would like to thank dear Cardinal Lorenzo Baldisseri and Cardinal Sergio La Roccia, Monsignor Fabio Fabene, Undersecretary, and the officials of the General Secretariat and assistants. Thank you all, Synodal Fathers, auditors, experts, brotherly delegates, fraternal delegates, journalists, singers. Thank you all for participating, which is so important. A particular vote of thanks to our two special secretaries, Father Giacomo Costa and Don Rosano Sala Salesiano, who have worked generously with great passion and have left behind every ounce of strength to prepare this meeting. I would also like very warmly to thank young people who are connected to us and all those who have made their voices heard. I would like to thank you for gambling about feeling that it's worthwhile to be part of the church and to enter into dialogue with the church, to have the church as house, home, family teacher, despite its human frailties, difficulties, and to have faith in the eternal message of Christ. It's worth joining the bark of the church, which sails throughout the world and opens up to all a warm welcome. It's worth to be here and listen to each other, to go upstream and to uphold the values of the family, faith, help the poor, service, and eternal life. Our responsibility here at this Synod is not to let you down. On the contrary, to demonstrate that you are right, that it's really worthwhile. I would like to thank you, young people who are here today, for the long path of preparation for the Synod that you have been through. You have taught us that the world of young people is so varied that it can't be fully represented. But you are undoubtedly an important sign of its presence, and your participation fills us with joy and hope. This Synod is a time of sharing. Consequently, I would like, at the very start of this assembly, to invite you all to speak out openly and bravely, integrating liberty, charity, and truth. Only dialogue can help us to grow. Honest, transparent, and constructive criticism can help, whereas useless chatter, prejudices, and formalities don't. And the courage to speak out has to be accompanied by the humility to listen. If a person I don't like speaks, I have to listen even more carefully, because everybody has the right to be heard, just as everyone has the right to speak. This open attitude to listening means that you are brave when you take the floor, because you are the voice of all the young people who are not here today. And this will open up a space for dialogue. The Synod has to be an exercise in dialogue, especially for those who take part. And the first fruit of the dialogue will be that everybody will then be open to novelty, be ready to change his or her opinion thanks to what he has heard. This is important for the Synod. Many of you have already prepared what you are going to say, and I thank you for having taken the time and effort to do that. But I invite you to feel yourselves free, to consider that as a rough draft, which is open to additions and modifications which the synodal journey might suggest to you. Let us all feel free to accept and understand others, and thus to change our convictions and positions. It is a sign of great human and spiritual maturity to be able to do that. The Synod is an exercise of discernment, frankness in speaking, openness when listening. These are all important if the Synod to be a true process of discernment. Discernment is not just a slogan, a piece of publicity. It isn't a technique for administration, nor is it a fashion of this pontificate, but it is an inner attitude that has its roots in an act of faith. Discernment is the way and also the aim that we are heading for. It's based on the condition that God is at work in the history of the world, in life's events, and the people. That is why we are called to place ourselves into an attitude of listening towards the Spirit, because we may have to move in an unpredictable way. Discernment needs space and time. That is why I say that during the work in the plenary assembly and in the small groups, every 5 speeches, we have a moment of silence. We observe a moment of silence to enable each and every one of us to pay attention to what has been said and to what that has given rise to in our hearts, so that we may truly understand what it is that strikes us the most. This is the key to recognizing, interpreting, and choosing. We are the sign of a church that is listening and on a journey. That cannot be limited to the words that we shall be exchanging here in the Synod. The preparatory work done up to now has shown us that there is a church that has a debt and needs to listen more, even with regard to young people, because they feel very often that they're not appreciated as they are, and therefore not welcomed and accepted, and sometimes even rejected by the Church. This Synod has the opportunity and the duty to be a sign of a church that is ready to listen, that is prepared to allow itself to be challenged, that doesn't always have a ready-made answer. A church that doesn't listen is closed to the surprises that God may send, and cannot be considered credible by young people who inevitably will distance themselves from her instead of coming closer. Let us let let us lose our hold on prejudice and stereotypes. We must get rid of stereotypes and prejudices in our hearts and minds. We must stop thinking that we already know who the man before us is and what he's going to say. Then it's difficult to listen to that person seriously. The link between the various generations are the link that will help us to enrich ourselves. And we may not even realize it's happening. Young people are tempted to think of adults as out of date. They are holding back the young people who are inexperienced and inexpert and don't know how to behave. All of this could constitute a serious obstacle to dialogue and to the meeting between generations. Because the present doesn't belong to young people alone. Clearly, we have to be very careful about speaking of them, putting them into categories that are now outmoded. If we can avoid that pitfall, then we will be able to help make possible an alliance between generations. Adults should overcome the temptation to underestimate young people's capacities and to speak badly of them. Once I read that the first mention of this goes back to 3,000 years before the birth of Christ, and it was found on a piece of clay in ancient Babylon, where it's written that young people are immoral and they will never save the culture of the people. So obviously it's an ancient tradition to speak badly of young people. Young people, for their part, need to surpass the temptation not to listen to adults and to think that the elderly are just outmoded, useless people, always wanting to begin from zero, just as if life only began with them. In actual fact, we old people, despite our frail physique, will be the memory of humanity, the roots of society, the pulse of civilization. To despise them, to throw them aside, isolate them, and ignore them is the sad mentality of the world, which is devouring us from within. To neglect the treasure of experience that former generations possess and can transmit to others is an act of self-destruction. Consequently, we need to overcome the plague of radicalism. In fact, to listen and to ignore stereotypes. It will help us avoid clericalism in an assembly, because this is what we are exposed to here, inevitably. This comes from a reduced vision of our vocation, which interprets the ministry that we have received as a power to be exercised.
A gratuitous gift to give. And this leads us to feel that we belong to a group that has all the possible answers and has no need to listen or learn, or at least people who pretend they're listening. Clericalism is a perversion, the very root of so many of the ills of the church, and we should most humbly ask for forgiveness and create the conditions so that none of this will happen again. But we need to fight against the virus of self-sufficiency and the hasty conclusions of young people. An Egyptian proverb says, if there are no elderly persons in your home, get one, buy one, because you'll need an old person. If you reject everything that was conveyed over the centuries, then one is in disarray, and humanity is now at a loss and disillusioned, and this has really wounded the hearts of many generations. So all the knowledge that we have learned over the century is a heritage, something that is passed on from generation to generation, without forgetting divine revelation that gives a meaning to history. Brothers and sisters, may the Synod awaken our hearts. The heart of the Church is fatigued and overburdened, but faith tells us that we have the Kairos. The Lord comes to us to call us to the plenitude of life. The future is not a menace that we should fear. It's the time the Lord promises to us so that we can acquire experience in the communion with Him, our brothers, and all of creation. We need to find the very reasons of our hope and pass them on to young people who have a thirst for hope, as Vatican II affirmed. Clearly, we can think that the future of humanity is placed in the hands of those who can transmit to the generations of tomorrow reasons for life and hope. An encounter which is intergenerational can be extremely fertile and engender hope. This is taught to us by Prophet Joel, as I recalled to the young at the pre-synodal meeting, the prophecy of your time. Your elders will dream, your young people will have visions and prophesize. There's no need for sophisticated theological arguments to show the need that we must help our people to walk the pathways of the Lord, to harbor hope and not only feel sorrow and doom. People often value facts without cautious judgment. In the current condition of the human situation, they only see troubles and doom. They say that if we compare our times to the past, our times are worse. And they go so far as to behave as if they had nothing to learn from history, the teacher of life. So let us not be tempted by the harbingers of doom, and let us not think of thoughts that are bitter. Often, some ideas don't come to the headlines. Let us think also of the wounds of Christ that are caused by sin and sometimes by the sons of the Church. So let us frequent the future, and from this synod, what should be forthcoming shouldn't just be a document that is often read by few and criticized by many, but something truly concrete that can carry on the work of the synod, which is to allow dreams to flourish and blossom hope and heal wounds, create relationships, and bring forth a dawn of hope with positive imagination, warming the hearts, giving strength to the hands, and inspiring young people, all young people, no one excluded, a vision of a future replenished with the joy of the gospel.